Most people believe World War II began on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler's tanks rolled into Poland. But what if I told you the true beginning was 20 years earlier? Picture this, in a gilded hall in Versailles, France, Minty 19th May. Document was signed that would plant the seeds of the most devastating war in human history. The German delegates' hands trembled as they put pen to paper. One delegate was so ashamed he refused to even look at the document. They knew they weren't just signing a peace treaty, they were signing Germany's death warrant. And here's the shocking part. The man who would become history's most evil dictator was, at that very moment, lying wounded in a Munich hospital, completely unknown to the world. The seeds of his rise were being planted in that very room. June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles wasn't just harsh. It was designed to crush Germany's soul. The numbers alone tell a story of calculated revenge. Billion gold marks in reparations. That's roughly $442 billion today. To put this in perspective, Germany's entire annual budget before the war was just 4 billion marks. But here's what's truly shocking. The French wanted to make the reparations even higher. They originally demanded enough money to rebuild all of France twice over. But money was just the beginning. Alsace-Lorraine, torn away and given to France. The Saar Basin, placed under League of Nations control for 15 years, all German colonies gone. Overnight, Germany lost 13% of its European territory and 10% of its population. Imagine if America suddenly lost Texas, California, and Florida all at once. Yet here's what truly broke the German spirit. The German army, once the pride of the nation with millions of men, was slashed to just 100,000 soldiers, no tanks, no military aircraft, no submarines. Germany, a nation that prided itself on military excellence, had been neutered. The German general staff, the most feared military mind in Europe, was completely disbanded. But perhaps the most poisonous clause was Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. Germany was forced to accept complete responsibility for the war and all its damages. This wasn't just a political statement. It was a psychological weapon that would haunt Germany for decades. German children would grow up believing their country was inherently evil, and from this humiliation, a dangerous myth was born. The stab-in-the-back myth spread like wildfire through German society. Many Germans believed their army hadn't lost the war on the battlefield. They'd been betrayed by politicians and revolutionaries at home. Here's the shocking truth. German soldiers were told they were winning right up until the armistice was signed. They returned home confused and angry, feeling cheated of victory when the Kaiser abdicated and the Weimar Republic was proclaimed in 1919. Many saw it as illegitimate. Democracy was foreign to Germany. For centuries, they had known only strong monarchical rule. Now, suddenly, they were expected to embrace a parliamentary system imposed by their enemies. It was like asking a nation of chess players to suddenly play checkers. The streets of German cities became battlegrounds. Communist revolutionaries, inspired by the Russian Revolution, fought nationalist paramilitary groups called the Freikorps. In January 1919, the Spartacist uprising in Berlin left hundreds dead. But here's what most people don't know. The communist leaders, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, weren't just murdered. They were tortured first. Then their bodies were thrown into Berlin's Landwehr Canal like garbage. The Freikorps, made up of bitter war veterans, became Germany's unofficial police force. These men had nothing to lose and everything to prove. They carried out assassinations and street executions with impunity. The Weimar government struggled to maintain order. Coalition after coalition collapsed. Between 1919 and 1923, Germany had 6 different chancellors. To many Germans, democracy looked like chaos. Politicians seemed more interested in fighting each other than saving the country. But the worst was yet to come, because when a nation's economy collapses, desperation follows. The year Germany's economy didn't just crash, it disintegrated, unable to pay the crushing reparations demanded by Versailles. The German government made a fatal decision. They started printing money, lots of it, The printing presses ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. By November 1923, one U.S. dollar was worth 4.2 trillion German marks. But here's the truly insane part. The government was printing money so fast, they ran out of paper. They started printing on newspapers, on wallpaper, even on playing cards. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January 1923 cost 200 billion marks by November. Workers were paid twice a day because prices doubled between morning and evening. Families burned money to heat their homes. It was cheaper than coal. Restaurant menus had no prices because they changed every hour. Here's a shocking story that shows just how crazy it got. Anna Weber, a middle-class teacher from Munich, watched her life savings of 100,000 marks, enough to buy a house in 1914, become worthless overnight. It couldn't even buy a single postage stamp. Her brother, who had borrowed 50,000 marks to buy a farm in 1920, paid back the entire loan in 1923. With the cost of a single egg, children played with stacks of worthless money. Like building blocks, prostitutes charged a wheelbarrow full of marks. People went shopping with suitcases instead of wallets. The middle class, the backbone of German society, was wiped out. Pensioners who had worked their entire lives found themselves begging on street corners. University professors sold pencils to survive. Doctors became janitors. The social order completely collapsed, and in this desperation, something dark began to stir. People began to blame democracy itself. They blamed the Treaty of Versailles. They blamed the November criminals. They're named for the politicians who had signed the armistice, but most of all, they were desperate for someone, anyone, to save them from this nightmare. In Munich's beer halls, a failed artist with a powerful voice was about to give them both a target for their rage and a promise of salvation. Adolf Hitler was nobody in 1919. A failed painter, a defeated soldier, nursing his wounds in a Munich hospital when Germany surrendered. He had failed the entrance exam to art school twice. He was homeless for years in Vienna, selling postcards to survive. But in the chaos of post-war Germany, nobody stayed unknown for long, and Hitler had one terrifying talent. He could speak. Quiet rise. The Nazi Party, founded in 1920, was just one of dozens of extremist groups spreading across Germany. When Hitler first joined, it had only 55 members meeting in Munich's back alley beer halls. But Hitler possessed something the others lacked: an almost supernatural ability to channel Germany's rage into words. Here's what's truly chilling. Hitler discovered his gift by accident. In 1919, the German army assigned him to monitor political groups. When he attended a small meeting and spontaneously gave a speech, the audience was mesmerized. One witness said it was like watching a man possessed by demons. Low, uneasy tone. "Germany is bleeding from 1,000 wounds," he would roar to growing crowds. "But we will make Germany great again." Within months, his audiences grew from dozens to hundreds, then thousands. People stood in the rain for hours just to hear him speak. Hitler's brown shirts, the SA, battled communists in the streets of Munich, Berlin, and Hamburg. These weren't political debates. They were wars. Over 400 people died in street fighting in 1923. Alone, democracy was literally fighting for its life on German street corners. And it was losing. The Nazi ideology was seductive in its simplicity. Germany's problems weren't complex economic and political issues. They had simple culprits: traitors, foreigners, conspirators. The solution, Hitler promised, was to destroy the Weimar Republic and restore German greatness. It was a message tailor-made for a humiliated nation. By 1923, Hitler believed his moment had arrived. Munich was seething with revolutionary fervor. The Bavarian government was in open rebellion against Berlin. The Weimar Republic seemed on the verge of collapse. Hitler looked at that chaos, and he saw his opportunity. He decided Germany was ready for revolution. He was wrong. November 8, 1923, 8:30 p.m., The Burgerbräu beer hall in Munich was packed with 3,000 people, listening to Bavarian State Commissioner Gustav von Kahr. Most expected a boring political speech. Then, Hitler burst in with 600 armed SA men, their boots thundering on the wooden floors. "The national revolution has begun," he declared, firing a shot into the ceiling. Beer glasses shattered. Women screamed. For a moment, it seemed his coup might succeed. He forced Bavarian leaders at gunpoint to pledge support for his march on Berlin. Here's the shocking part. Hitler had planned this coup in just 4 days. 4 days to overthrow the German government. General Ludendorff, Germany's legendary World War I commander, agreed to join. The Nazis believed having Germany's greatest war hero with them guaranteed success. They were wrong. The next morning, November 9th, Hitler led 2,000 supporters through Munich's streets. They sang patriotic songs and waved German flags, believing they were making history. Ludendorff walked beside Hitler in full uniform, medals gleaming. They thought the police would never fire on Germany's greatest general. Instead, they were walking into a trap. At the Feldherrnhalle monument, 100 Bavarian police officers waited, rifles ready. When Hitler's column approached, someone, no one knows who, fired the first shot. Chaos erupted. 16 Nazis died in a gunfight that lasted less than a minute. Hitler dove to the ground so fast he dislocated his shoulder. The man who claimed he would die for Germany was the first to hit the dirt when bullets flew. Ludendorff, however, walked straight through the gunfire untouched, a true soldier to the end. The Great Revolution lasted less than 24 hours. Hitler fled in a yellow Opel car, leaving his dead followers behind. 2 days later, police arrested him at a supporter's house, reportedly still in his pajamas. But failure became Hitler's greatest teacher. During his trial, he transformed from a failed revolutionary into a martyred prophet. The judges were sympathetic. They let him speak for hours, turning the courtroom into his personal stage. He used his defense to attack the Weimar Republic, claiming he was the true patriot. Instead of 20 years in prison, he received just 5, even better for Hitler. The trial made him famous across Germany. In Landsberg prison, he began writing Mein Kampf, My Struggle. It wasn't just an autobiography. It was a blueprint for destroying democracy and creating a 1,000-year Reich. He dictated most of it to his devoted follower, Rudolf Hess, who visited daily. Hitler served only 9 months. When he walked free in December 1924, he had learned a crucial lesson. Revolution wouldn't work. Democracy had to be destroyed from within. Hitler had learned the most dangerous lesson of all, how to gain power legally. For a few years, it looked like Germany might recover. American loans came in under the Dawes Plan. The economy stabilized. New buildings rose from the ashes. Democracy seemed to take root, but the seeds planted in 1919 were still alive, waiting in the dark. Here's the terrifying truth. Every humiliation in the Treaty of Versailles, every worthless mark printed during hyperinflation, every street battle between extremists, every failure of the Weimar government, together, they created the perfect storm. Germany had been systematically prepared for dictatorship. Hitler learned patience. He learned to work within the system while secretly planning to destroy it. He rebuilt the Nazi Party from scratch, turning it into a political machine built for one purpose: legal revolution. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, Germans once again looked for someone to blame and someone to save them. This time, Hitler was ready. The Treaty of Versailles was supposed to end all wars. Instead, it guaranteed the next one would be far worse. The men who signed it in 1919 thought they were creating peace. In reality, they laid the foundation for genocide. 23 gave Germany a failed revolution and a failed revolutionary. But within a decade, that failed revolutionary would transform himself from a beer hall agitator into Germany's supposed savior. The question wasn't if he would seize power, it was when. And when he did, the world would burn.